Siddhi Hum Hum Om A Guru Vajradhara Sumati Muni Shasane Karma Tavardanya Shiva Samanya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Om A Guru Vajradhara Sumati Muni Shasane Karma Tavardanya Shiva Samanya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Muni Shasane Karma Tavardanya Shri Bhadra Varsamanya Sarva Siddhi Om Dagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Chen Nyamda Dala Tuje Sisu Su Gebe Shesan Dala Tendu So Oyun Sungye Nawa Tsetu So Zichin Nina Solwa Tepetse Techen Kolo Usule Shune Ayela Sampe Tutu Malupa Geme Lungi Dupara Jingilo Tsuni Tsodan Ditu Shepetse Dunki Namke Usule Shune Lapchen Suni Yonsu Sovadan Cherani Tu Chiwara Chingilo Chancha Bari Nitse Tukutu Niu Peme Sedrule Shune Janchu Trupe Keke Kushishin Tukendala Topara Chingilo Dagilo Na Chula Chupadan Chumin Sanjura Nepe Shiwadan Chudan Tutu Malupa Beme Lungi Topara Chingilo Tamche dan dichi watu nekap tamche tu rese kiamne lama keleme tuje jagi tala sisusul gongyab darwe namta tachala jetsu lame tuje ragone kudan sungi nawa teme tu nyamsu nyur katsan tu parasho kewa kundu yada lamada breme chiki pelalu chuching sadalangi yoterapsone Dorje Jangi Gopar Nurto Basho Kudandagi Lu Pakyuke Sundandagi Na Pakyuke Tutandagi Dunyarme Chitu Jingi Alob Makyuke Kudandagi Makyuke Sundandagi Makyuke Tudandagi Dunyarme Chitu Jingi Alob Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha Yabuke Geshe Meto Charirarishi Nide Kempati Tangye Chintu Imbite Ulwaragi Duku Namla Shinla Chuparashu Vietnam Guru Ranamandala Kanyayatayami Sangye Chodan Sogye Chonamla Chancho Partu Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jisun Gepet Sonamgi Androla Pinchira Sangye Tuparsho Sangye Chodan Sogye Chonamla Chancho Partu Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jisun Gepet Sonamgi Androla Pinchira Sangye Tuparsho Sangye Chodan Sogye Chonamla Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinsun Gebet Sonamgi Androla Pinchire Sangye Dubarasho. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good morning. Very often, emphasis is given to the importance of, of how we do what we do instead of what we do. And this determines a large part of, of the experiences and the result of what we do. Because there's many opportunities that come to us, many things that at the end, in our lifetime that we interact with, etc. But the way we do it, the attitude with which we do something has a very, very big importance. And now that we're here together, we've chosen to dedicate this space of our lives, whether it be it 1 day, 2 days. We've chosen to dedicate this time to be together. It's important. How we do it becomes very important. When I say how, I don't mean like how we're seated or for how many hours, but what attitude we have. What the attitude in which I give the teachings, that you listen to the teachings. Traditionally, there are 6 important aspects to determine this correct attitude. And it's very common at the beginning of longer teachings. These 6 attitudes are explained. Actually, they're 3 plus 6. The first 3 are quite easy. It's said that when we listen to teachings, Dharma teachings, that it has to do also if we're going to, if we're watching videos or reading a book, or even more if we're seated in the presence of someone who is actually explaining something to us. So the first 3 attitudes are the three defects, defective containers that we need to abandon. So imagine that if the person in front of us, the one teaching the Dharma to us, is pouring pure water into a container. The nectar is actually the term used. And in this first context, the pot is upside down. So what happens if the pot is upside down? No matter how pure the nectar is, nothing's going to get inside the pot. This is the example where one is physically there, but mentally is somewhere else. Here, we're there, but we're not there. How often has that happened with us? Even with talking with someone, or even sometimes when we're just reading something. It's possible to read something, but at the same time, not It's possible to be somewhere else with our mind. So the pot is upside down when we are not mentally present, where we are physically present. If we're not physically present, the pot doesn't exist at all. But in this case, the pot is in the right place, but we need to make sure that the position of the pot is correct as well. Because I can spend months listening to teachings without learning anything, you know, because you weren't listening. Maybe you were physically there, but you were mentally somewhere else. So our presence, our mental presence, our awareness of the present moment is very important. The attention given to what is said, the meaning of what is said, what we're going to do today, and what we're going to do in this context is, where you can only do the two together. What I try to do is I take my understanding of something, in this case of mind training, and I try to walk along this path together with you. But it's a path that we need to do together with our imagination, with our understandings. But to do this, we need to be here present together. So for this, that first pot must not be upside down. The upside down, an upside down pot would be when one is physically there but also sleeping, or when one is, it's more common for one to be physically there but the mind to be somewhere else at work or somewhere else. The second aspect is when the pot is in the right position, it's right side up, but it's dirty. What happens if the pot has poison inside of it? Doesn't matter how much pure water I put inside, what happens to the water? It becomes poisoned. It becomes polluted. This happens when we're present, but our attitude of listening, there's some kind of negative a mind of envy or anger or prejudice. So we're listening, but we're already have a negative emotion. It can be jealousy, attachment, it could be anger, fear, different kinds of negative emotions that if we listen with those, what happens is that we are polluting the rest. It's a kind of judgment. This is also true in our daily life. If we're talking to someone, if we already have some kind of prejudice, a negative a mind towards that person, or while we listen, then everything the person says is so filtered. So in the temples, for example, we need to finish it here, but as the main entrance is made with a white floor. We did that with the entrance over there, and we'll do it also here with the main entrance. The meaning is that when you go into the temple, you need to review your own motivation and try to come in with a clean mind, free from the various mental defilements, free from negative prejudice towards what one is doing. The third defective container is less dangerous, let's say, but it's more difficult to avoid. And so it's a pot that is is right side up, is clean, but it has holes in it. So what happens? Doesn't matter how much water we put in, sooner or later the water just runs out. And this happens when we are there, we listen, but we don't have this capacity to retain the information that we're listening to. We don't have the memory. And I think that we all have a few holes. I can imagine there are very few people that I've met that didn't have these holes. Me first and foremost, I remember once I received teachings in Nepal. It was the commentary of a Jugini by Geshe Chekawa Rinpoche. I was 16 years old or something like that. And it was a beautiful experience. I loved the teachings. I was there very attentive. But after years now, I remember very, very little. I hope one day when I pick up those teachings again, I'll be able to access the teachings that I received. But what happens is the following: when we receive teachings, our pot fills up. But if we don't use that water for something, that water just runs out. Also because we start putting other things in the pot, you know, and so that other water just flows out. So the metaphor is, if I receive water, and that water, instead of just receiving it, I use it to water the seeds, that will bring that will allow those seeds to germinate and to grow. I'm not wasting that water. I'm using it. And so when we receive what we receive, it's very important right from the beginning. Start with the idea that we need to use what we're going to receive. Put it into practice. Receive teachings only to receive them without having the attitude to wanting to put them into practice, without seeing them as a tool. But if we see them as an end in of itself, then we just lose them. Even more so today, where our objects of distraction are so many and we have an enormous quantity of information that we're receiving constantly, what happens is that if we don't use what we receive, so many other things just fill up our pot and everything, it gets lost. So we need to be present in the present moment, physically and mentally, and put the pot in the right position. We need to have an emotional state of mind as balanced as possible so that we don't pollute what we're going to listen to. And then try also to have a specific attention to what is being said so that we can retain what we receive with the determination that we will put it into practice. So even if we're able, if even if we're only able to keep 10%, for example, but we're sure that we're going to use that 10%, let's remember that the teachings are a tool. It's not the teachings are not an end in and of themselves, but it's already beneficial if we can use, just that 10% that we're going to be able to retain. And instead, now let's move on to the 6 awarenesses, which are Geshe Chekawa, so to apply the 6 discernments or the 6 awarenesses. I speak in Tibetan. So, the first 3 is you see yourself as the patient, using the metaphor of the sickness and the patient. So I see myself as the patient, as a sick person. I see the teacher as the doctor, the teachings as the medicine, and putting into practice, like taking the medicine, the cure. I have the awareness that I have the faith that I can be healed, and I have faith that and understanding that this healing process is long and graduated. So I go to the doctor. Why do I go to the doctor? Because I recognize that I'm sick. There's something inside of me that I want to change. I have symptoms. I have pain, whatever it is, that takes me to, that brings me to the doctor. And so what happens is this first awareness where I see myself as the patient is extremely important, because we can listen to teachings with an attitude of wanting to learn them, to know the teachings, because it's beautiful to know them on a conceptual level, on an academic point of view, of knowledge, and for knowledge's sake. It's I don't see this too much here, but there's also an attitude of an attitude of collecting teachings, like collecting baseball cards or little figurines. I've received this teaching, that teaching. In the monastery, traditionally, what one should do, for example, is have a notebook where you write all the teachings and the transmissions that you receive, initiations, empowerments, because one day, if one needs to teach someone else, one cannot transmit what one has not received. But often this attitude can become a kind of collectionism. So, I go to that teaching so I can also have that one too. And one could maybe even go to teachings with this attitude of belonging, the attitude of, oh, I'm part of the group, and so I have to have received this teaching. Often, or sometimes we can go to teachings with a curious mind, or just to increase our intellectual knowledge. But the correct awareness, not that the others are negative, but it's not the awareness that allows us to use what we receive in the best way. So if I listen to the teaching, seeing myself as a patient, that means I'm sick. What am I sick of? But I'm ignorance, selfishness, um, uh, fear, anxiety, anger. Each one has his own. But I find myself in this cycle, the cycle of samsara, this inner cycle of mental defilements, negative actions, reactions. I want to get out of this. So I come here to the teachings because I need to transform something inside of me. I want to change my way of living. I want to change my way of being. I want it to be more healthy, mentally, physically. I want to be able to overcome my own conflicts. I want to be at peace with myself. I see that I'm not completely at peace with myself and with others. For example, my personal objective that I've set for myself as one of the priorities, one of the main priorities for my life. I set this when I was about 18 years old. I put it in these terms, and it's still valid. My objective is I want to be in harmony. I want to be well with myself and with others, independently of where I am, with whom I find myself, and in what situation I find myself. I don't want my state of peace or joy or stability or harmony I don't want it to be dependent on an external condition, which doesn't mean that I want to be uh, um, to be cut off from the world, but I want to be in harmony with the world. This is the direction that I've set for myself. So for me, also sharing the Dharma is part of this, my own path here. This first awareness is I'm the patient. There's something There's something that I need to heal inside myself, and I'm here for that. I'm not here to study medicine. I'm here to be healed. There's a term in Tibetan that says the patient, the these long-term patients are the best doctors. I mean, those who've had chronic disease and have been have had a healing process for years. Often they know the healing process better than many doctors. But we're not here to study medicine. We're here to be healed. Is that clear? But it's something deep inside of ourselves. I mean, we need to have this awareness. It's not that we're here for the curiosity of the medicine, or not because we want to be doctors. No, we're here because we want to be healed. And the one who teaches us has the position similar to a doctor. What's the role of a doctor? It's not to heal. The role of a doctor is to give a correct diagnosis and then indicate the healing path, the cure. The doctor tells us to take this medicine, to avoid this, to do that, and change this life, to have this kind of lifestyle, do these kinds of treatments. But the doctor cannot heal. No healer or doctor can heal. What he can do is interact with the sick person so that that person heals himself. So the one who teaches us the spiritual path has the role like a doctor, the one who gives us the medicine. And the Dharma, the teachings that we're going to receive, we see them as the medicine. We receive the Dharma, the teachings. Dharma is the teachings. So I'm the patient, the one who teaches is the doctor. What is taught to me and transmitted to me is seen like the medicine. Then we have three other awarenesses that are also very important. But for getting to those very quickly, these three awarenesses, these first three, will determine the way we relate with the Dharma and our spiritual path. So the role of spiritual guide is not to eliminate suffering or the role of the spiritual guide is to give the medicine, to give the Dharma, like a doctor gives the right diagnosis. Once we're able to see ourselves as the patient and see Dharma as the medicine, then we understand that the Dharma is not an intellectual process about understanding, because we're not here to study medicine, we're here to be healed. So how does this apply to my life? And has a very precise function. So then we have, on the basis of these first three, we have the next three. So sometimes I get a little bit confused with the order of these two, but in the end, it's the end. There's this awareness, the awareness of being able to be healed. Because if I go to the doctor and I don't believe that I can be healed, I'll never really take the medicine. Is that clear? So it's extremely important. The faith that I have in healing is extremely important. So I want to be well. I want to be in harmony with myself and with others independently of where I am or with whom I am or the situation in which I find myself, I see this. I think this is possible. It is possible to reach a state of harmony and peace. I, I have faith in myself. This is this is the fourth awareness. The fifth is is that this process of healing, it comes by taking the medicine, by following the therapy. I mean, it seems obvious, no? If I go to the doctor and I like the doctor so much, he gives me a very clear diagnosis. I feel well with what the doctor tells me. But afterwards, if I don't follow the therapy, if I don't take the medicine, and I don't stop eating what I'm supposed to not eat, and I don't do the exercises I'm supposed to do, and I don't follow that healing path that was indicated by the doctor, and I go to him 6 months later, probably he'll find me probably the way I was or even worse. The only thing that comes to our favor is that there's also the nocebo effect, no? Even going to the doctor, that some kind of positive effect that we'll have. But this healing process comes about by taking the medicine, and in the same way, the process of of healing comes about by following the teachings, taking the medicine. So when do we take the medicine? During the doctor's visit or afterwards? Usually it's after, no? I go to the doctor, I'm seen by the doctor, and when I get it's when I get home that it's important to remember to take the medicine in the morning before breakfast, in the afternoon, etc. You know, I've done, and I'm still doing some treatments, and you need to have total awareness of the treatment. And there's some, like every half an hour, you need to take this number of drops, and you need to do in the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening before you go to bed. Even if, most of us, most of us are happy if the treatment is just one shot and then we don't have to think about it anymore, but it's not like this. Also because what's the difference between like a what's the difference between a a, a sickness that is chronic or a sickness that has just has just suddenly appeared, like maybe breaking an arm, for example, where you just put on a cast, which is much different than having chronic sickness in my liver or in my kidneys. I mean, when the sickness is chronic, it takes a lot longer to be healed, to heal. So this sickness that we have did it just, come on, or is our sickness of jealousy and envy and arrogance and etc. Is it chronic? Yes. So the sixth awareness is that this healing process comes. It comes in a graduated way, and it's a long process. So I'm like the patient. The medicine, the one who guides me is like the doctor. The teachings, the Dharma is like the medicine. I can heal. I have this capacity to get out of this cycle of suffering. It's possible to reach this state of peace called so-called nirvana, and this healing process comes by taking the medicine, by following the therapy, and this by putting into practice the teachings. And finally, for last, this process is long and graduated. Is that clear? Why the sixth awareness. Because I've seen often one starts practicing Dharma with so much enthusiasm, and then the years go by and I'm not healed yet. It's not working. Do you know how many times I've how many times people have come to me? I've heard, I've been here for 15 years and it's just not working. It doesn't work. So the question is, it doesn't work? Okay. My first question is, did you practice or did you just receive your diagnosis? Because there are those who take their diagnosis, receive the the doctor's prescription. They take the prescription and then they frame it and they put it on the wall at home. And then once I've once I have that prescription and I'm part of that group of patients and feeling that being part of being part of that group and having that prescription, if I think that that's enough to be healed, then it's just not. You say, oh, it's 20, I've been here for 20 years. I've been part of this group 20 years, and it's not working. Well, since when is being part of a group enough to be healed? There's some texts that give the example that they say that if simply being in the presence of a master, and if simply being in the presence of a master, it actually uses the example of fleas, saying so. Says, we don't have any fleas here, but maybe a stink bug, other bugs that we have here. So imagine, a stink bug that's here in the temple, all year long, year after year, should also reach enlightenment, because it's in the presence of the spiritual guide and receiving the teachings. So obviously that's not the case. Instead, when we actually have the courage to look at ourselves in the eyes and put into practice what we receive, that's when we're taking the medicine. So the process is graduated and it's long. This awareness is important. There's no hurry. Well, maybe people say, I've been here for 20 years, there's no benefit. But I know it happens, though I've known the person, then I can ask them, well, but do you respond? Do you react in the same way today as you did 20 years before? The person says, of course not. Do you have the same level of patience? Yes, much more patience. Are you more aware of of your actions? Yes. Okay. So obviously it is working. But why do you say it's not working? Because I'm not a Buddha yet. Well, then there are others who have the feeling that over the years they're actually getting worse. It could happen, but often what happens is, let's say that I need to go somewhere. I need to clean, and when I begin cleaning, there's my level of I have my own level of hygiene, what I consider clean. So if it makes me think of when I was in India, the house where I lived was a house of Lama. It was one of the few houses that had a refrigerator. And it would happen that every once in a while, when there were big meals or lunches in the department where I lived, where there were 200 monks, they would ask me to, if they could put the meat in the refrigerator. And there, at the time, I was living with my dad, and when my dad was living there, we didn't eat meat. But in Tibetan culture, it's different, and so sometimes they would put the meat in the refrigerator to make momos for 200 people. It wasn't a half kilo. So sometimes you would see just to keep the fridge closed, they would have to put a rope around it, and every day, and then also in India, every day the lights, electricity would go out for a few hours. So, you know, so the kind of, so at a certain point they take the meat, they take it away, they cook it, and you would think that they would clean the refrigerator, right? Yeah. So, um, so I came home and our white refrigerator was pink. Okay, so without talking about how it influenced my other senses. So then I say, well, you should, and I say, can you clean the refrigerator? And they say, oh no, but we cleaned the refrigerator. But then you see how they would clean. They would take like what they used to clean the floor, the chairs, and the plates, and put it in the fridge. And they would clean like that. Let's say that that's our level of hygiene. And then we start cleaning. Everything seems fine. When we get used to that, then then we can see another level. We say, okay, well, actually, maybe it's not clean. It's pink. It should be white. And then we start cleaning that pink, and then it seems totally clean at a certain point where we get used to that level of cleanliness. And then we realize, oh, there's something else. Okay, now there's stains. Okay, now let's get rid of those stains. And the more we clean, the more we realize different levels of dirtiness. And it's not that they weren't there, we just had a different awareness, a different understanding of cleanliness. And so when we start working on ourselves, at the beginning, our understanding of ourselves is at one level. And the deeper we go, the more we change our behavior, our own awareness, then we start seeing aspects of ourselves that before we didn't notice. It's not that they weren't there before, but we just had different priorities. We saw things on a different level. Is that clear? So I have no doubt that the practice of Dharma works very well. And also when we take these mind training teachings that we're going to look at in at the introduction of 7-point mind training, for example, here's on page 39, it says, speaking Tibetan, you should understand the significance of this instruction, the mind training, as like a diamond, the sun, and a medicinal tree. Like a diamond, like the sun, and a medicinal tree. This means that, what is this metaphor? It's said that in front of even in front of even in front of gold jewelry, a beautiful gold jewelry. If we have just a tiny, tiny piece of diamond, that diamond will just overwhelm that gold jewelry. There's this word in Tibetan called sije, which is like charisma. Sije in Tibetan, it means like charisma. It's a person where if that person is present, you can feel that person's presence and aura more than the others. So here it says, maybe you have beautiful jewels. When you have jewels of gold and other precious stones, no matter how beautiful they are. If you have a diamond, the diamond overwhelms. It's much more beautiful than all of those. So this practice of mind training, even if it's not put into practice in every one of its aspects, even if just a small part of it is put into practice correctly, that part can overwhelm all other spiritual practices. It's like the rays of the sun. Because why like the sun? Because if the room is totally dark, you just need a tiny opening, just a you just need one little ray of light to illuminate the room. So in the same way, you just need a small part of the mind training teachings put into practice correctly that can eliminate the darkness of ignorance. And it's like a medicinal tree, because a medicinal tree, you don't need the entire tree. You just need a piece of the root. You need a fruit. You need a leaf, just a part of the tree to cure the sickness. And similarly, you just need a small part of these teachings put into practice to cure the sickness of selfishness and egocentric. Um, so when one puts the teachings into practice with sincerity, it works. It doesn't mean that you need to practice from beginning to end. You just a part with sincerity, and one thing leads to another. So, and it's also useful to say that this time of the 5 degenerations will then be transformed into the path to the fully awakened state. What would it be like to practice a spiritual path if we needed to wait for ideal conditions to practice? If before practicing we needed to wait to have all the time available with no one around us to bother us, for us to be side by side with someone who leads us every day, have a good level of concentration, etc. So you can wait as long you can wait as long as you want. Instead, a very important aspect of the mind training teachings is the more difficult external conditions are out. If one puts them into practice, the stronger one's spiritual practice becomes. So it's through this training, through these teachings, the, the, these 5 degenerations will become a tool to give us even more strength to take us to this fully awakened state. The 5 degenerations can be seen in different ways, but we have the degeneration of time, which means that the time of the watch, clock, has less and less worth. Life goes by faster. Life goes by faster. We have less time. And here where we live, actually, I mean, do we feel like we have more and more time, or does it have less and less worth? It's very strange, because in our modern world should allow us to have more time, shouldn't it? We don't need to plow the ground, the earth, the soil. We to heat. We don't need to go, get wood. We don't need to go fetch water. to communicate. We can communicate very easily and quickly. For food, we can go to the market. Um, even for cleaning, we just use a vacuum cleaner. Or, I mean, how many things have we created in this modern world to simplify and one would think to give us more time. So many things, but what's our subjective experience? Do we have more time or less time? The feeling is that we have less time. I was talking a few weeks ago together with Geshe Losang Geshe Chanchu Gyatsen, and we were saying that, like, in Tibet, before 1959, the old Tibet, let's say, the activities of a day in the monastery. Today in India, you wouldn't be able to do them even in 2 days' time. The same activities. Even one of my teachers who said every morning when we would do, for example, there was like the week of the medicine Buddha practice, where every day we would do the practice and we would do the sadhana sung very slowly. That very slowly means like 4 lines. There's one verse at the beginning, like the first part of the refuge prayer, to receive, to recite those 4 lines. One could go from the monastery to Lhasa, and back, walking like an hour and a half, let's say. It wasn't Sangye, the sang, it was 15 minutes of Sangye, because one needed to recite, meditate, visualize, etc. And they, they did it in a way that today would be absolutely impossible. Instead, we do an enormous quantity of things, of study and practice. And, I mean, they did so many things, practice and study that today, not even in 2 days, would they be able to do the same. So it's like as if time just had less worth. Even just look at children. The perception that I have is that that childhood lasts, less and less. Adolescence comes sooner, ends sooner. I was talking to someone. We were talking about a newborn, a newborn girl. She's 3 months, and she's wearing clothes of a 9-month 9-month-old. But beyond the physical growth of a child, but if we look at the subjective experience of the person, I mean, just we have this. There's this feeling that childhood doesn't last as long. Life is going by fast, and there are many theories here that it's not the time to talk about it. But here we have the degeneration of time. Then there's the degeneration of our surroundings, of the environment. So the environment is not as healthy. General pollution. There's the degeneration of food that can nourish less and less. There's the degeneration of sicknesses. There are more and more new sicknesses, and the degeneration of medicine. Originally, I mean, this was explained 1,500 years ago, and saying that they say that the herbs that were being used and the medicine, were bringing more and more negative side effects, and were healing less and less and less. And then there's also the generation of beings, where the beings have mental states, negative mental states that are stronger and more manifest. So we live in times of degeneration. Someone might say, so in front of all this, everything becomes harder. But if one really wants to really practice mind training, it's said right at the beginning that the more um, the, this, the more degenerate the times, the better the conditions to practice mind training. And then we'll see how. But it's very positive, and the first time I understood this, it gave me a great sense of gratitude, and it's so I thought, so I don't need to wait for any specific condition to practice. I can put these teachings into practice right now, and this is something marvelous. Because otherwise, one would say, okay, I have my family, I have my job, I have my habits, I have many things. Oh, maybe one day I can set this all aside and dedicate my life to to meditation. Um, you know, you know. So, oh, I can leave everything and reach enlightenment in 3 months. Mm, I've realized in the past when, you know, you know, um, you know, those who have tried to set everything aside and to go to a monastery, they end up in the monastery with all their problems. Like there was a story, for example, this American girl, and she at a certain point, she was a doctor, and she fell in love absolutely with the Dharma, and she said, I need to reach enlightenment quickly. I can't lose any time. And so she had a great career or job, and she left everything, house, everything. She went to live in India. She went into a monastery, a nunnery. She became a nun. And over the years, she learned different things, but her deeper, you know, uh, her deeper conflicts and shadows were still there. I mean, this process of healing is long. I graduated, as we said. So So Lei expected, to be enlightened in 3 years, and that didn't happen. She realized that the process of healing, um, it didn't depend so much on where she was, but on how she was facing her life, and she wanted to go back to the condition she had, but she wasn't able. She did come back, but she didn't have a house. She didn't have a family. She didn't have her job. I mean, it was very chaotic, the whole thing for herself. And it almost became the fault of the Lama, the fact that she didn't have that stability that she had before. But here, the point is that no matter where we are, we don't need to wait for any favorable conditions to practice. Wherever we are, that's a good condition for our practice of mind training. With this, let's go to the text. Mind training is a path, and there are many texts that guide you on this text. I chose to follow the texts in the kind of, let's say, the order of the lineage. So we'll start with this first one, um, given by Atisha, who brought these teachings to Tibet. And then we'll go to Geshe Tapa with the 8 verses of mind training, and then we're going to conclude with the 7-point mind training. And then, if we have time, we can also look at the medicine to vomit and the inner tumor. This is the order that we're going to follow. What's important is the jewel garland of the Bodhisattva is a guideline for our life. It's advice from heart to heart, and each one of them. I mean, each verse put in practice is enough for a lifetime, you know. And it's not that you can take any verse, you know, in and of itself. You know, it stands on its own. It works. It's a guide, and this is the guidelines for our lives. And it's not like you can not practice the 10th verse if you haven't realized the 9th. No. Someone can help me remember which verse. Okay, so we had left off on verse with verse number 12. I'm going to read quickly from 1 to 12, and then we'll start with 12. The jewel garland of the Bodhisattva, homage to great compassion, homage to the masters, homage to the deities who inspire devotion. Put aside all doubt and hesitation, and take delight in earnest practice. Abandon entirely lethargy, dullness, and laziness, and exert yourself constantly with enthusiasm. With mindful recollection, vigilance, and conscientiousness, guard the doors of your senses at all times. Again and again, thrice, by day and by night, examine the continuum of your mind. In the second verse, it's one of the first passages that with this development of conscientiousness, to train yourself in having more awareness in what you say, or you know what you in your this state of self-awareness. Traditionally, it's said that you are surveying the doors of your senses, surveying your own mind. Proclaim your own failings, but do not look for faults in others. Hide any good quality you have while declaring others' virtues. Let go of concerns for gain or respect, and always renounce the desire for fame. With few wants, remain contented, and repay any kindness you receive. Cultivate loving kindness and compassion, and make your bodhichitta stable. Avoid the 10 unwholesome actions, and let your faith be forever strong. Overcome all anger and conceit, and adopt an attitude of humility. Renounce unethical forms of livelihood, and sustain yourself according to the Dharma. Forsake material possessions, and adorn yourself with the riches of the Aryas. Leave behind all busyness and distraction, and remain in places of solitude. Solitude, not like feeling lonely. Solitude understood as being free from distractions. Refrain from idle gossip, and always guard your speech. Whenever you see your masters or preceptors, cultivate the wish to serve them with respect. Both those possessing eyes of Dharma and those first setting out upon the path, they are to be regarded as your teachers. And when encountering any other beings, look upon them as your parents or your children. Do not befriend those who act in harmful ways, but rely instead on true spiritual friends. Abandon any feelings of hostility or ill will, and be always joyful wherever you may go. Avoid becoming attached to anything at all, and remain free from craving and desire. And here we've gotten to verse 12. Speaking Tibet. Attachment prevents the attainment of happy states, and furthermore, destroys liberation's vital force. Should you discover a means to happiness, strive constantly to put it into practice. When I read all these verses, I'm sorry that you don't speak Tibetan because it's really more beautiful in Tibetan. In no matter how, the translation, no matter how good it is, I go back to the Tibetan where it says chape tetro mitochin. Attachment does not bring states of joy. Dendro, dro means to go. Dewa means happiness, well-being. So go with joy, with happiness, which also means that within this existence, there are states where there are less suffering. So we can read this in two different ways. So attachment towards attachment towards things does not bring to better rebirths. It doesn't bring me to to states that are better. On the other hand, we can say that attachment doesn't even bring us to states of joy, because when we have a strong attachment deeply, I mean, what are we attached to? Are we attached to the object or to the sensation of happiness? I mean, what do we want in the end, really? We want this feeling of happiness. But does it bring that? When I have a strong attachment to something, this is my water. With this, with this, this my water, I don't want to give it up for anything. I mean, what is attachment? There's a difference between attachment and desire. Desire is, I don't have water. I project my happiness onto water. I want it. This is desire. Attachment, instead, I'm able to have it, and I'm not going to let it go. This is what we mean by attachment. Often in the teachings, we use the word duchak in Tibetan. Dupa is desire, and chakpa is attachment. So duchak is a composed word that means both. It's a composed word, has desire and attachment. In this context, this specific text, it is talking about actual attachment, but we can also add the desire. But let's take just attachment. I have something, I like it, I don't want to let it go. I'm going to hold on to it tightly. Why am I keeping that for myself? Because I think that that thing is making me happy. But that attitude of wanting to keep it, that attachment, does it bring me more happiness or does it bring me more suffering? Someone would say, oh, someone would say, well, if they'll give me more happiness, because if I have something that I like, I'll do what I need to do to keep it. But is it possible to always, to never be separated from the things that we are attached to? Sooner or later, we have to leave them. And the stronger my attachment, the stronger my suffering will be when I have to be separated from it. Because when there's a strong attachment, then we already have this pre-suffering. I mean, have you ever pre-suffered for something? You've gotten something, for example, oh, how wonderful, I have it. And then as soon as I have it, I start worrying that it's going to end. It's going to, I waited I waited a year for this vacation. If I get to my vacation spot, and after a short time, I think, oh, in 5 days I have to go away. When it's suffering, are you suffering because the vacation is going to end, or because you're not able to accept the process of impermanence? So attachment takes us to suffer in the moment of the separation, but even before it, we suffer, we pre-suffer, and that pre-suffering keeps us from enjoying. So instead of enjoying my water, oh, how wonderful, how good, I'm already worried that soon it's going to, that soon there won't be any more, and it keeps me from enjoying the present moment. So, what's the opposite of attachment? Is it just being distanced from something? In my opinion, I see. I say according to me because I haven't. It's not something I've read. Could be right or wrong, but the opposite of attachment is the profound understanding of the impermanence of the object, which means I can have water. I like water. Sooner or later, it's going to end. It's part of its own nature, and there's nothing wrong with that. So while I have the water, I'm going to enjoy it to the fullest, and when it finishes, I will be grateful for having had it. And there's a part of teachings, I mean, that Lama Ganchen emphasized a lot in Self-Healing 3, where he said it's important to enjoy something without attachment. I like water. Okay, good. It's fine that you like water. As I drink the water, I should enjoy it, but without attachment, which means I'm aware that the water sooner or later won't be there. It's normal. It's in constant transformation. There's nothing wrong with the fact that sooner or later it's going to finish. Here, we're together. It's wonderful. Let's enjoy this moment together. We love each other. Sooner or later, this moment is going to end because we need to leave each other, or because we get angry with each other, or someone needs to go. You know, people, for example, people who are well together, how long can that pleasure of being together last? Is it just forever? Even, you know, so let's say that physically the people can stay together, you know, that state of joy, does that continue, or sooner or later does it become suffering? I mean, sooner or later that state of well-being ends because we live in a cyclic uh, um, world. One is well, one is not well. And the crazy thing is that we project our own problems, our own conflicts on, our own poisons onto to others. And our tendency is to do that to the people closest to us. So if we're two people, we are together, sooner or later that moment of pleasure of being together is going to end. But how do we live it without attachment? We enjoy it as much as we can, and when it's no longer possible, we are grateful for what we've had. We're in total awareness of impermanence, and we try to create the positive conditions to have positive being together. So this, so furthermore, this attachment destroys the vital force of the path towards liberation from samsara. Because attachment to what? Attachment to worldly pleasures, to feelings, you know, anything related to our senses, our image, attachment to our image, to our attachment to wealth, and the worst, the strongest of all attachments, the attachment to the reality around us according to how we think it should be. If we put all these attachments together, so physical pleasures, I mean, do we have attachment to physical pleasures? Material things? Also, we have this to recognition, to our image, yes. But if we put these three aside and we have on the other side the attachment to reality according to how we think it should be, how the other person should act, how reality should around us should be, this one alone is stronger than all three put together and even more subtle. What happens is when we have a strong attachment to these things, freedom, liberation is not even at the horizon. Because as one of my masters said, Geshe Chekawa, the first thing that we need for something to come about is to desire it. And if I don't want to be free from samsara, I will never be able to reach that state. When we have a strong attachment to physical, to our senses, our um, to our image, to worldly, possessions and goods, and how we think reality should be, then we can't at the same time also have a strong desire to be free from our mental defilements and reach this state of peace that transcends all of that. I mean, the two things cannot go together. And who talks louder, our worldly attachments or our desire to get out of samsara? In your opinion, who has the louder voice? Attachment does. Simply for one reason, because we are strongly conditioned by, we're used to it. It's all there. That's it. So strong attachment does not only take away the states of joy even on a worldly, mundane level, what happiness and joy, but it's on a very mundane level. Attachment it keeps us from enjoying what we have, and it makes us suffer afterwards. On a spiritual level, it's a strong obstruction. It keeps us from putting energy along our path because we're taken by these other distractions. I hope that's clear. So then the verse continues saying, Quand tu dewe chu ton wa deni tanu. There, Kantu, there, where you see Tongwa, something. Ch means dharma, but also means phenomena. There, where you see something that brings you to happiness, de wei chu, phenomenon of happiness, where you see anything that actually is able to help you be happy, something that brings you to happy states. That's Derne Tanyu Taparcha. There, then strive constantly to put it into practice. It's just as simple as that. So just let go of attachment to things that don't bring to states of happiness mid-long term. What's to short or mid-term, and what's more? It's more important to so short term is here in this present moment. Mid-term would be for this lifetime, looking along this lifetime, and a long term would be for your future lives. Okay, so okay, for a moment, let's not even think about long term. Let's just if we were to say, what's more important, immediate pleasures or your well-being and the pleasures that are mid-term? What's more important, this pleasure of eating what you like or avoiding illness? Or and also like sustaining, a healthy body. What would we say? That it's more important to sustain a healthy body. So if we believe that, then we should stop eating what we know is bad for us. It's I mean, in practice, though, it's not that easy, is that? But this is the direction. Where I see that there's something that's really good for me, like, in mid and long term, I need to put my energy there. So on one hand, I need to abandon attachment. Abandon, in this context, it means stop projecting our happiness and stop trying to, stop to holding on to that which cannot sustain a state of happiness. A classic example would be physical pleasures. You know, if someone comes, I've given this example many times, if someone that I love comes and caresses us, so we like it. But if it goes on and on and on and on and on, that sensation of pleasure, does that remain the same? Sooner or later, it becomes suffering, doesn't it? Just think of one physical pleasure that when it's maintained, that inner state of satisfaction and happiness is also maintained. Is there anything, is there any substance out there that can do this? I've never taken any kind of, um, any kind of, I've never taken any substances. Maybe there's someone here who has, without any judgment, But is there a drug out there that can? Is there any kind of substance that, like, the more I take, the better I am? Then I'm just gonna, buy. I'll buy kilos of it for myself and for others. If really there's something out there that, where the more I take, the more my state of joy and satisfaction is upheld. But in reality, what is the reality is that when we take something, that in that immediate moment it takes us to a feeling of well-being and happiness. When contact is maintained with that object, after a short amount of time, that feeling of pleasure diminishes, even if that contact with that object continues. These are our fake friends. These are, these are things that cannot sustain our happiness. Where we see something that is able to sustain our happiness, it's not making reference to things that we like. Where we see something, where we see that something can where you see something can sustain a mind of happiness, then don't let go. So on one hand, it says let go of attachment, and on the other hand, it says cultivate attachment. This attachment of grasping is good. Depends on what we're grasping. Because if I grasp at something, but after a while that thing no longer has that same effect on me, then it's not working. The problem isn't grasping at something. Is what am I grasping? What am I holding on to? Let me look for a metaphor. It's a little bit like maybe I'm in a position I'm about to fall, and to not fall, I hold on I grab onto something, to somebody, an object, regardless, just to stay up. Except that after a while, then I realized also that that object is also falling over with me. You know, so instead, I need to look for an object that is stable, that can hold me up, because the same way, the problem isn't having attachment. The problem is what I'm attached to. Because having attachment to things that cannot sustain a state of happiness, I just repeat one more time, the point is not feeling happiness or pleasure. The point is being able to sustain that satisfaction and happiness. Is that difference clear? So attachment with this attitude of grasping at something is not wrong, but what is it that we're grasping at? And the term attachment is generalized to things that cannot sustain this level of satisfaction or happiness on a mid or long term. Instead, where we recognize that something is beneficial, we need to hold on to that, grasp at that with all our strength, like inner stability, for example. This deep feeling of love. The more I have, the better off I am. Patience, for example. A healthy lifestyle. The more I have, the better off I am. They're different aspects, they're different things that the more I have, the better off I am. Those things, we need to grasp at them and not let go. So where you see that something that can really sustain a healthy lifestyle, don't let go. Grasp at it, hold on, and don't let go. So this verse shows us a very important something very important, which is that being that attachment is not the problem. It's what I'm attached to that brings the problem. So our lifestyle, on a physical level, and also verbally, you know, mentally, the things that are good for us, we need to hold on to them and not let them go. And I think with this, that's clear enough. Now, how can we put that into practice? There are two levels, like in everything else. One is conceptual, and one is practical, experiential. Conceptually, there's not much to understand here. Conceptually, we can see the objects to which we have attachment and ask ourselves, staying in contact with this object, this feeling of peace and well-being, will it be sustained by staying in contact with this object? It's very simple. Where we see that the answer is no, then it's just not worth it, which doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the object. It just cannot sustain what it is that we're looking for. Instead, where we see that there are external objects, which is actually almost impossible, but when we see the lifestyle, aspects of our lifestyle or parts of our mind that can on a short, mid, and long, even long-term way, that can be sustained, then we shouldn't let go of them. But we're made up of habits, not of knowledge. So we need to adapt. once I know that something is good for me, I need to remember it again and again. And even though it seems strange, it's like in our Western world, Western culture, we have this idea of like the angel and the devil. On one side, there's like there's what I know I should do, but then there's my habit of doing the opposite. This isn't the battle between good and evil. This is the battle between an awareness and a habit, an understanding and a habit. Let me give you an example. How difficult is it to follow a diet? To not eat what we know is bad for us. Is it easy or difficult? You agree that it's hard? Why? Because on one side, there's my awareness, a conceptual awareness. I know that this is bad for me. And then on the other side, I have this memory that this thing in the immediate is good for me because I like it. Okay, just, people say, oh, well, sooner or later I need to die anyway. Okay, well, anyway, if it's not for, if, if it's not for one thing, it'll be for another. So at least I get sick, eating something I like. I've, I've heard this argument so many times. And here's this, the battle is going against the current and the current of our habits. And we need to constantly remind ourselves that yes, it brings me pleasure short term, but it brings me, it brings me, it's harmful to me on a mid and long term. Do I want mid and long term to be sick or to not be well? No. Okay, then I shouldn't eat it now. Okay, so an example for me is mozzarella. Lots of people, maybe it's chocolate, but so so for a while I just said I don't care, because what happens is that I bloat, my stomach bloats, and then I realized had I had a I I my problem actually became chronic. It was a kind of an inflammation, and it wasn't just a temporary bloating, So so when when the problem starts at 7 years old, and I'm not 20 anymore, I'm 40, and then I started to see, okay, it's better to be careful, because a very short-term problem one can manage, but I can't permit myself to sow the seeds of chronic sickness that can transform into something worse. Life is too precious, so avoid. We need to avoid um, what is harmful to us. So I'm lactose intolerant, but say mozzarella is one of the best things that exists. What do? You put your finger in your mouth and you just don't eat mozzarella. What helped me was this following reasoning. Why do I eat? Do I eat because I like it or because I need to eat? I mean, really, at the end of the day. If I could not eat, I think it would be much better. I mean, how much time and energy do we waste or use up eating? I mean, the resources, good shopping, choosing, bringing it home, cooking, digesting, all the problems linked to digestion. So, the effects, one way or the other, digestion. And I just imagine, how great it would be that if you didn't ever need to eat. I think it would be wonderful. I followed his reasoning for myself. I mean, so really, why do I eat? Because I like it or because I physically need to eat? I eat because I need to eat. So if I eat because I need to eat, then I shouldn't eat what I like. I should be eating what is good for me. And this reasoning really helped me um, avoid eating the things that are bad for me, and without all this suffering, you know, as if like not being able to eat mozzarella was some kind of condemnation. No, it's bad for me. So why do I like what's bad for me? Because I'm sick. And when the body is sick, the body is attracted to what is bad for it, to increase that unbalance. This was explained to me by a doctor. So here, the point is something's bad for me. I should have the strength with myself to say, I want to be well. So I'm going to avoid it. I have nothing against mozzarella. Um, mozzarella, I love you. You stay there, I stay here. We need to put this attitude into practice. And this point has an enormous power. I mean, if we can start with the smallest things in our lives, the smallest things. This is bad for me, and even if I like it, I'm going to avoid it. This is this is good for me, even though it's difficult for me. I'm going to do it. So naturally, just starting from the smallest things, the simplest things, then that will take us to be able to face the harder things. And just to conclude this verse here, there's also this aspect where, okay, there's something that we like that's not bad for us, just enjoy it, with this awareness that sooner or later it's going to end. And when it does end, think how wonderful that it was, that it was like being in the presence of someone that we love. Could be our parents or our children, anyone. It's 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 healthy, it's good to interact well with someone that we love, but sooner or later we need to be physically separated. So I'm here with you with this awareness that sooner or later we need to separate, um, following the following uh, the natural ways of the world. It's not a condemnation either. If someone doesn't accept impermanence, then when here we are together, one is already suffering, um, pre-suffering that moment of separation, pre-suffering the death of someone or the separation. I never be able to handle that day when my mother, my father, whoever it is, won't be there anymore. Enjoy this moment now. Just, you know, yeah, observe with a level of balance and centeredness the reality of impermanence. You know, with develop a kind of develop a kind of affection, a kind of gentleness, a gentle understanding of the reality of impermanence. As I said before, we could spend all day, on each one of these verses, but now let's move on. So the next verse says, "Torma sampagayin par tang par denyi du cha de." That's very practical. It says, any task you have set out to do, it should be completed before embarking on another. With this approach, both will be achieved. But by doing otherwise, nothing will be accomplished. That's quite simple, no? When we start something, we need to finish it, and then we start something else. How does this apply to our spiritual practice? For example, there's a path called Lamrim in Tibetan, which is the is the graduated path towards enlightenment. It was taught in our lineage when, in these terms by Atisha, the same one who, the author of this text, and then studied and as a guideline, and there are many recipes, let's say, you know. So, you know, um, we always need to, like a recipe, we need to respect always the order of the recipe. Like if you want to make pasta with tomato sauce, first first if you want to make pasta, first you put in water. What would happen if you put in water and then oil and then a little bit of the onion and garlic and then the pasta and then some tomato? What would come out? I don't know, but certainly it wouldn't be what we understand as pasta with tomato sauce. So at the same time, in the spiritual practices, there's an order to respect of important steps, because one brings to the other, and the steps are really quite simple. And I'm going to take advantage now to to go over them in just in big steps. Sometimes people ask me, where should I begin? Even if in our tradition, Lama Ganshin taught us that we don't have lesson number one, lesson two, lesson number three, but there is a very clear inner path to follow. And the first one of the path is to rely correctly upon a spiritual guide, which means to rely on the Dharma, to want to grow, to want to follow a path, want to reach a state of peace. So rely correctly on a spiritual guide and also oneself. The second step, and now I'm going very quickly without going into too many details. The second one is to develop the awareness of the preciousness of this life. The third is awareness of impermanence, the certainty of death, certainty of the uncertainty of death, the certainty of one's own mortality and impermanence that brings also this sense of urgency. Life is precious. I need to use it to grow spiritually, and I can't lose any time because soon I'm going to die, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to have these same conditions that I have now. After this, there's the awareness of the law of karma, that every action brings its own results and every action is important. We can't we can't overlook anything. And then there's the awareness of what samsara is, on a specific level and on a general level. And takes us to the conclusion that I want more than anything else to get out of this, the cycle of samsara, which is seeing, which it takes us to develop renunciation. Then we allow ourselves to look at others. We expand this feeling of wanting to get out of samsara towards others and have faith in ourselves. And this is called bodhichitta. Once one generates this commitment to help all other beings get out of samsara, then one should train in the 6 perfections. Within the last of the concentration, we have also the training of samatha and special insight meditation. So I'm going very quickly through this. And at the end of this path, one eliminates ignorance on a conceptual level and a non-conceptual level, taking out the root of samsara. And that's the path. But if I have not realized the preciousness of this life and I try to meditate on emptiness, which would be practicing the perfection of wisdom, and I meditate a little bit on emptiness and a little bit on wisdom, a little bit of generosity here, and then I jump to renunciation, and then to bodhichitta, and then I go back to death and impermanence, and I'm just jumping from one to the next. Atisha tells us, with this approach, but by doing otherwise, nothing will be accomplished. If instead, if I start one thing and I do that before I go on to the next, then I will have the realization. So first of all, I need to put emphasis on relying correctly on a spiritual guide. Then, once I have trusted myself to a spiritual path as my priority in life, then I'm going to put emphasis on the preciousness of this life. And when I feel that joy, when I recognize the value and the worth of the conditions that I have at that point, then I familiarize myself with impermanence, the certainty of death, etc. And I do one path, one step after another. In the meantime, I try to remember, I remind myself all of the steps. So it's like I'm walking, I'm go, in this moment I am here, but I know I'm going there. I mean, so having an idea of the whole path is very important. But I need to put emphasis on realizing each step. Is that clear? A little bit like saying I'm in elementary school, but then I'm gonna have to go to junior high school and then high school and then to college and then graduate school, etc. I mean, I have my path, but I'm not going to read my university textbooks while I'm in elementary school. I can even buy them, but I'm going to read them. I'm going to study them in this graduated way. Okay. So, okay. Okay, I'm reading this book now, and I say I'm reading this book now, and once I finish this book, then I have that book and that other one. That's fine, but to 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 do well, to do your high school studies well, you need first to have the basis of your elementary school. So Atisha here reminds us that when we begin a practice, we put emphasis in that, and we respect the length of our own legs. So it's useless to try to be where we're not. I mean, I can imagine, once I will be there, I will do like this, but the emphasis, the energy should be put mostly where I am today, where I find myself, where I am. So, there were times where we've had an opportunity to look at the graduated path to enlightenment, the Lamrim. This when we look at the 7-point mind training, this for our winter retreat, there's the whole Lamrim path included there. We'll look at that. There you can see that, for example. It's in one actual page, on page 39, where it says before starting the training in in love and wisdom, it says first train in the preliminaries, or it says, um, and you go look at the preliminaries is the first part of the of Lamrim, where it says Dampo Nopo Choda Lalap. So we'll look at that not today, but during the winter retreat. So what I mean to say is that there is a path to follow. And we try to do it with presence in a graduated way. I'm doing something, I finish that thing, and then I go on to the next. I'm doing a certain meditation practice. I create a little bit. I take I develop some familiarity with it. I took a commitment. I finished that, you know. But otherwise, we don't do one or the other, right? It's, okay. Taktu tina gadaloe. Taktu tina gadaloe. Gantu tuwe sem chunch. Take no delight in harmful deeds. Should thoughts of superiority arise, there and then subdue your pride and recall the instructions of your master. Let's look a little bit at the translation here. Taktu didak, taktu means always. Dik, dikpa in Tibetan. It's papam in Sanskrit. It's a word without translation. Why? Because the concept doesn't exist in our culture. It's simply that. So before trying to find a word, let's try to understand what it means. We have two types of sensations, feelings. There are three types of feelings, actually. There's a pleasure, all the sensations that we have, and when we have them, we want them to continue, and when they end, we want them to come back as soon as possible. That's the so-called happiness, this feeling of pleasure. Then we also have a feeling of suffering, sensation of suffering. These are all the feelings that when they're present, we want them to end as soon as possible, and when they do end, we don't want them to come back. Then we have neutral feelings, neutral sensations, that when they're there, we don't care whether they continue or not. Nothing comes without there being the causes and the conditions for that to come about. Nothing comes from nothing. Everything that we experience it because there's this process of cause and effect. There's no feeling of pleasure that arises by itself, or a feeling of suffering that just arises by itself. Let's imagine, let's look for a metaphor just to understand it a little bit better. I take an object. I take this object and I throw it. Once I throw it, that action the action of throwing has finished. But imagine I'm somewhere where there's no gravity. I'm in space. I'm able to throw it, and it just goes around the planet, or it's a satellite. Let's say I throw it, and so I threw it. It takes strength, and it continues. One day, that object, has gone around the earth many times, and then one day, And then one day I find myself in front of it and it hits me in the head. And when it hits me in the head, it hurts. What was the cause of that suffering? That cause of being hit by this object? Having thrown it before. So the action of throwing it generated that strength that stayed with it, until it met something that it interacted with that brought its result. So it's a kind of inertia was generated, this strength that was generated that was unvaried. It can change if it interacts with something else. It can diminish or increase, but once it comes into contact with something else, it transforms into a result, another experience. So I throw the object and it goes round and goes round and round, and one day I find myself in front of it and it hits me. So the cause, what was the cause of that pain? Being in that position, being there at that moment, or having thrown that thing in the past. Having thrown it is the cause. Being in that position, in that moment, is the condition. So the cause, the cause was, was going, was always there, but the condition, because I wasn't there in that very right moment, um, not, it wasn't happen. Let's say for example, I drive, I'm driving, and I was speeding one day, and then one day I got a speeding ticket at home. So what's the cause of getting my speeding ticket? Because one day I was driving and I was speeding. I've already seen people. I've seen people get angry with the traffic police, so giving them tickets. But what's the cause of the traffic ticket? Is it the actual policeman, or because you broke the law? Or, for example, if I park where I shouldn't park, at a certain point, the policeman comes, and it gives the the policeman, the traffic cop, gives a ticket. So, what's the cause of this ticket? Is it the traffic cop, or is it the having parked there? I mean, the policeman would be the condition, you know. The and the cause of the ticket is parking where one shouldn't park. That's clear, isn't it? So when we do something, the action in itself generates a kind of strength that's called a karmic force, Leginupa in Tibetan. It's like an inertia. Imagine I throw something. Let's say I throw something where there's no gravity. And just that object continues until it meets something else. At that point, that something else is that condition. So every time we experience a feeling of pleasure or a feeling of pain, that's a result. It's a result. It's an inertia, some kind of strength that we generated in the past that adds up with the condition of the present. The conditions are of two types. There are conditions related to self, that can be internal or external, be conditions related to others. The inner that related to self would be our thoughts and our own actions. Those are our own conditions. The conditions related to others are actions of others, those around us. The internal and external conditions interact with the causes of the past, and one lives the result. Every time there's a result, the cause is never immediate. The cause is always prior. What is in that present moment is just a condition. Is that clear? Now, the actions of body, speech, and mind that 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 manifest as a result, they manifest as feelings. If it's manifest as a feeling of suffering, is dikpa or papam. It's this inertia, this strength of actions, and this that when it manifests its result, it comes out as suffering. Instead, in Tibetan, sonam or punya in Sanskrit, sonam in Tibetan, or these are the actions and this karmic force that's generated from that action, this inertia of that action, that when it manifests its results, it will manifest as a sensation of pleasure, because it's through our sensations that we experience the world, that we experience reality, and it's in our feelings, in our sensations, that our actions of the past manifest. So when we say dikpa, which is translated as negative karma or negativity, here it's harmful deeds. Sometimes it could be translated as sin. It's not negative in and of itself, or that dikpa means an error. Dikpa is something that is its interaction brings a result of suffering. It's the causes of suffering. And sonam or gewa, it are actions that bring to happiness. It's not right or wrong. It's a little bit different. So here where it says tak tu dik dang gatrer wet, take no delight in harmful deeds. Dik, that which brings something harmful, when the causes are manifested, it's manifested as suffering. But the word harmful or negativity in our Western mind, it can take us to think of what's right and what's wrong. But here it's what brings suffering. So ga instead brings joy and pleasure, more pleasure, and cha is to separate. So it says it's so separate yourself. Separate yourself from the joy that of what brings misfortune. There are actions that bring that bring negative results that we can be attached to, no? Buddha, to simplify, talked about the 10 negative actions like killing and stealing, having a wrong sexual conduct, or lying, using speech, divisive speech, using violent speech, idle speech, wishing for the suffering of others. I mean, there's some examples of actions that are deemed negative. For example, when someone is taken by anger, somehow has like pleasure, someone takes pleasure in bringing suffering to that object of anger. If I feel hate towards someone, I'm attracted to what is going to harm my object of hate. I've seen, for example, someone who had throat cancer, and someone commented, well, with every, say, he was talking about a politician and said, oh, with all the things that the person has said, this is rejoicing for the suffering of someone else. So always take no delight in what brings suffering and harmful deeds. Before, where it says, where you see something brings happiness, grasp to that, don't let it go. Instead, here it says, take no delight in harmful deeds, let it go. Even if in that moment it seems pleasurable, if it brings suffering, don't grasp to it. What mid long term is going to bring suffering. Datutitan Gatrelwes. So take no delight in harmful deeds. Daktarwe. It's not wa, it's we. We in Tibetan, here's this participle. It's grammatical participle that indicates an action. So this means that the next verse is a result of the previous. So because I don't want to take delight in that which brings suffering, as soon as I see that a feeling of superiority, as, because arrogance brings suffering. Sorry. So should thoughts of superiority arise, so when thoughts of superiority arise, okay, Gangtun Semchunse, I feel I'm superior to you because I'm more intelligent, I'm more beautiful, I'm better than you because I'm richer, because I'm more spiritual than you, I'm superior to you because I'm more humble than you. Reminds me, I always remember this saying of Roberto Benigni, who was commenting on the Divine Comedy, and at a certain point he said, the humbleness is the most difficult of virtues, because just thinking that you are humble is enough to not be humble anymore. So once we feel superior to others, since we want to be separate from what brings harm, so in Tibetan here the verb comes first. So because I want to separate myself from that which brings suffering, as soon as I realize a feeling of superiority towards others, there and then cut it. Subdue your pride, your arrogance. How? By recalling the instructions of your guru. So what do I do? As soon as I realize I have a feeling of superiority towards someone else, since that feeling of superiority brings suffering, and I don't want to suffer. I don't want to take delight in harmful things. As soon as I realize this inner feeling of superiority towards others, which is an attitude that mid and long term will bring suffering, what should I do? I should not nourish that attitude of superiority. And to do that, I recall the teachings. I connect with my masters, with the teachings I've received, and I try to find my own identity that doesn't exist by comparing myself to others, because a sense of superiority from comes because to be able to see ourselves, we compare ourselves to others, and it's just endlessly tiring. It's the three modalities, the three attitudes of selfishness, this obsession with self-gratification, this fact that we're not able to see anything that isn't through this filter of the I and the my. This selfishness divides everything, the people and and and, and situations into to 9 categories, 3 and 3, the 9 objects, 3 times 3, 3 objects multiplied by 3. Those that benefit me are my friends. I have attraction to them, to my friends. Those who harm me are my enemies, and I have aversion to them. Those who do no harm nor good, I'm indifferent to them. I'm neutral. That's the next 3. That's the basis. Now let's multiply by 3. Those are those who are good to me are my friends. Those who are good to my friends are my friends. Those who harm my enemies are my friends. Even if it seems crazy, but one of the strongest things that can unite two people is a common enemy. Having a common enemy generates more union than having friends in common. It's strange, but it's true. And it's one of the easiest ways to manipulate people is to create common enemies. Close my parentheses here. Orwell talked about this in 1984. What was one of the key points of our great brother, of George Orwell, that time he talked about the government, for the government to have control over the population, the country needed to always be at war. It didn't matter against whom, but the country always needed a threat, an enemy. Not going to get into this. Let's just close that parentheses. Our point, our selfish way of acting, it works like this. The ones who are good to my friends are my friends. The ones who are harmful to my enemies are my friends. The ones who harm me are my enemies, and I have aversion. So, enemy means when I have aversion to one who who harms my friend is my enemy, and the one who is good to my enemy is also my enemy. And then we have the 3 neutral, who's I'm indifferent to the one who does neither good nor bad to my friends and my enemies. In front of all 9, we have 3 different attitudes that, which which transcends whether one is a friend or an enemy. The one who has more than me is more joyous, more spiritual, is richer, is more beautiful. So someone who has more than me, something that I want, then we have feelings of envy, regardless of whether it's a friend or an enemy. We have envy towards he who has more. I have aversion towards you because you have what I don't have, but that I want. It's, it's crazy. I mean, it's not enough that I don't have something, but then I have to suffer because someone else has something that I don't have, as if that person having it keeps me from having that. So what's our spontaneous feeling towards he who has more? Is it to rejoice, or or to have envy, or are we indifferent? It would be nice to rejoice. Our tendency often, through 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 selfishness, it's not always like this, thank goodness, but our tendency is to feel envy towards those who are the same as us, or as rich as we are. They receive the same attention that we have. They're as beautiful as we are. Then our attitude is to be competitive. I need to become better than you. And he who has less intelligent, less rich, less attention. So I see that person as having less, and my attitude is to feel superior, to be arrogant. These 3 attitudes are exhausting, and it's somehow no one ever relaxes. Because if I'm with someone who has less, I need to show my superiority and not lose ground. When I'm with someone who's the same, I need to gain ground. And then if I'm with someone who has more, I need to even, I need to get to that point. I need to get more. And I'm generalizing this attitude of selfishness, this way that selfishness manifests itself. And what is this? This, it, what happens is I see myself by comparing myself with others, and it's very tiring. Let's say we're in a group. We're in a group of people. I really like you. You're lovely with me. How much affection I receive from you, how much attention I receive from you, is that something objective or subjective? What determines how much I receive from you? What you do to me, or the value that I attribute to that, based often on a comparison? Because at the beginning you don't even smile to me, but then at a certain point you smile to me, and I think, oh, well, that's wonderful. And then, you know, then you smile at me, but you shook that person's hand. So why you just smile at me, but you gave your hand to someone else? I mean, we can, do, you know, we can use with anything, like, I don't have a car. I finally get a car. How wonderful it is that I have a car, is my wonderful car. But then I see someone else has a car that is faster, is nicer, etc. So my car just is not as nice as it was before. But what determines the value of my car? Is it, you know, is it, the value is often um, based on a comparison. And if we base our own identity comparing ourselves to others, then we're it's a real trap, because we'll feel superior on one side and inferior on another side, instead of just looking at ourselves. So here where it says, take no delights in harmful deeds, these so-called negative actions, and should thoughts of superiority arise, or you know towards others, which means as soon as a feeling, as soon as to see yourself, you need to compare yourself with others to feel good. Just let go. Don't follow that dynamics, because that brings suffering. Remember the teachings of your master. Go back to what is virtuous. Don't generate your identity based on what others are, what others do, don't do. I'm not more because you are less. And I'm not less because you have more. Is that clear? We need to really feel it. So the key of this verse for me is that, one, following the previous verse, where we see something brings suffering, we shouldn't cultivate it. We shouldn't um, be happy with that which brings suffering. And as soon as I realize I have an attitude where I need to compare myself with others to see myself, let's remember that feeling superior or feeling inferior are two manifestations of the same. That's clear, isn't it? So if I feel superior, to someone, then I will inevitably feel inferior to someone else. It's really important that this clarity is there. Feeling superior, feeling inferior are two manifestations of the same. Have you ever realized that someone who has an inferiority complex, um, is- if you, someone with an inferiority complex is quick to also um, to squash someone else. Um, this necessity, it's there at the base. There's this necessity to compare oneself with someone else. So we need to stop comparing ourselves with others to be able to see ourselves. In the next verse, we're just going to do just the first two lines, because the Shukpe Semye Jumpetse. Should you ever feel daunted or dejected, Shumpa, it's also the word used to translate depressed, Shumpa, where you don't feel faith in yourself. It's the opposite of feeling superior. It's feeling incapable, inferior, incapable, where one doesn't have any more objectives, where you feel like you're not able, etc., etc. So, should you ever feel daunted or dejected, or this feeling of depression or in feelings of not being capable, semsisuna tomparcha should semki senyi tomparcha. This I'm going to look at the dictionary. This word here, sem. Okay. Semki senyi de pacha. De pa means to praise. When we recognize the qualities of something, one praises. So semki senyi de pacha. Sem, mind, and sang means to beauty, glory. So going back in the dictionary, it says that which is high, sublime, glorious. So the glory of the mind, um, you know, semicolon, praise it, encourage and praise. So should you ever feel sad, depressed, etc., praise the glory of your own mind. Recognize your own qualities. What does it mean to praise the glory of your mind? The nature of my mind, the nature of 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 of, of the minds of all beings, including Buddhas. My mind, your minds. As Geshe Chekawa said in the teachings, he said the mind is full of defects, but it has a great quality. What you teach it, it follows. Our mind is interdependent. Our mind is in constant interaction, and the direction we give it, it follows. If I create a habit, the mind will follow that direction because it's in constant transformation, interaction, and it transforms according to those interactions. Even if I'm not well and full of fear and I'm full of anxieties and envy, everyone has his own, and there are moments where I feel like I'm not able, etc., and one just really knocks oneself down. At a certain point, you need to remember and praise your own qualities. And the deepest glory, most glorious quality of the mind is that we have this ability that no one can take from us, this ability to transform, to change, to interact. So according to how I interact, my mind will transform, and I can transform it in any direction. When we take the example of Milarepa, for example, his representation is here on my right, up here at high. We look that image that high up. Then there's that green window with Buddha Amoghasiddhi at 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 the 10th position. Milarepa is seated with his hand at his ear with one leg up. Can you see him? Milarepa, for example, was someone in the first part of his life. He suffered tremendously when he was young. He came from a very rich family. Then his father died, and at the tradition at the time, when a man when a man died and the children were not yet of age, the brother of the father of the family needed to take care of the family. And then um, when the when the boys of the family became men, then they would take care of managing the family. But uncle, his uncle took control of the wealth, but he actually enslaved the young boys and the mother. And when he became of age, he he had been treated so badly. The mother was treated so badly, and Milarepa generated a tremendous hate towards his uncle and the rest of the family who permitted that. He asked, he wanted to take revenge. Um, he and and he even asked his mother if it was. He asked permission from his mother. He left the village to look for black magic to take revenge, and so he he came back and he took massive revenge and killed hundreds of people. All of those who had participated in this maltreatment of his mother and himself. It's upon the death of his father. After having killed all of these people, he realized that not what that was not the right thing to do, and this revenge certainly did not bring any kind of happiness. To make a long story short, at a certain point, he finds Marpa, his spiritual guide. It's just that you can see also depicted there. So he had this life absolutely empty, and he was feeling tremendous guilt. And Marpa guided him in the first years in a very hard way, because it's said that Milarepa had the weight of having killed all those people, and before being able to purify himself, um, Marpa was very hard on him, and you know he in this process was very hard, and he almost tried to kill himself 5 times, it's said. And then at a certain point, Milarepa is able to go beyond, overcome that. Marpa guides him along his spiritual path, and he's actually able to reach enlightenment in that same life, and he's known as one of the most important spiritual masters in the story of Tibet, and his life story is very beautiful and well known. So it's not the example of, for example, like Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa at 3 years old was giving teachings. He was invited to homes, families' homes, to teach, because he already manifested spiritual realizations, from birth. Um, you know, so at that, um, at you know, he was sought after by high lamas at a very, very young age, and then was asked by the family to take him so that he could study. At 12 years old, he was doing the self-initiation of Heruka. But right from the beginning, he had a marvelous abilities, and one could say, oh, Lama Tsongkhapa, he was just born like that. Even if, he had a very arduous path of himself. Instead, Milarepa was not born with any kind of manifestation of an enlightened mind. He suffered tremendously the first part of his life, And even if, once he had turned himself over to the correct path, that was also very, very difficult for him, he was able to do it. What allowed him to go this path is what the same thing that we have. The qualities of our mind and the qualities of Milarepa's mind are the same. The qualities of Lama Tsongkhapa's mind or anyone else. We all have the same potential. So should we feel sad? Should we ever feel depressed? Or we see that, oh, there's nothing to do. We should praise deeply our qualities. Not qualities like, oh, I'm nice, I'm kind, I'm good. No, just the qualities of our own mind, our own potential. We all, there's, there's no one who does not have this potential to get out of suffering. Our mind, our being is in constant transformation according to how it interacts. If it interacts in one way, it transforms in that way. In another, in that other way, like the story of Gunilamala, disciple of Buddha. Actually, before he had killed 999 peoples, his name means the necklace of fingers, because at a certain point his parents died, and he was led to believe that to save his parents from a rebirth of suffering, so that his parents wouldn't have to stay in the hell realms forever. He needed to offer. This is he, he needed to offer 1,000 human lives to this certain god, and he needed to make this kind of necklace of the fingers. And he had killed 999, and then at a certain point he came across Buddha, and he said, "Oh, here comes the 1,000th being," and he wanted to get him, but he wasn't able to get him, and they were walking through the woods, and normally he was able to just catch everyone. Everyone was very afraid of him, but as he was trying to catch Buddha, and Buddha was just calmly walking, but he couldn't catch him, and then he yelled out to him, said, "Stop, stop," and Buddha turned around and said, I I I am stopped. The one who's not stopped is you. Understand? I mean, meaning that the one turning in samsara is him, as where Buddha had gotten out of turning around in samsara. He was able to help him understand that he was taking the wrong path. Gunilamala, he followed him, and he, in his lifetime, following him, reached the state of nirvana, this deep, this peace and the freedom from samsara. So the point is that if we interact positively, we can change our mind positively. We can release ourselves from the suffering. So we need to praise our own mind. I have this potential. I can be happy. I can live at peace. It depends on how I interact, because every interaction brings a transformation. And where, if we ever feel hopeless or depressed, we need to praise strongly our own inner qualities, are the glorious qualities of our mind, which is our own interdependence. Is that clear? This is a very important point, because it means having faith in oneself. We can do it because we're interdependent. Our mind transforms according to how it interacts. It needs time, but it's possible. we have marvelous conditions. When we look at the great masters, these examples of those who have reached states of peace and balance, they had to put effort, they had to dedicate themselves. Look at Lama Michel Rinpoche. It's not that Rinpoche spent his life so easily. He put so much dedication, so much effort in his life. Already born with particular qualities. Luckily, I mean, so also remember that the deeper qualities that we develop, we bring them with us from life to life. So in it's not that, I mean, that level of balance that you develop in this lifetime, you will bring to the next. You don't have to start from zero again. You bring them. You bring these deeper qualities with you. We all do. So it's possible to get out of suffering. It's possible to live in a state of peace, but it's a graduated process. But it's thanks to the interdependence of our mind. Even when we see someone who has reached this state, they've reached that state by interacting in a certain way. In the same life, in very few years, I've seen people go beyond states of suffering that inner negative dynamics. That just imagine. There was even one person. I even thought of one person. The only way to get beyond this deep suffering mind would be to die and be reborn and do a complete reset. And instead, I've seen people really overcome deep negative inner dynamics. So we need to remember. We need to remind ourselves that we can go to praise these interdependence of our mind. And this next line that says meditate on the emptiness of both refers to the following verse. So we'll see that after lunch. So it's time for dedications. Drove musai tatu negyurichi Bewa kundu yada lamata Dreme chiki pela luchuchi Sada yente repsuna Doce changi gopar nyurtu resho Modele sente Nime kuyan delekshi Nitsen tatu tepe Concho sungi chingi lo Concho sungi no trupso Concho sungi trashisho. At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. At night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Have a good lunch. I just want to rejoice. It's not